So good morning, everyone. My name's Katie Towers from Ultra Commerce, and welcome to this morning's webinar where we're going to walk you through how we can help you automate some of the supply chain functions within your business. A little bit of Q&A before we do the intros and get started. So the talk track will go for approximately 30 minutes. It will give us 15 minutes at the end to answer your questions. But in the Zoom box down below, you will see a Q&A panel. Please feel free to add your questions in that panel as we go, and we will answer them at the end. This session will also be recorded and will be available on demand and sent out to you at the end of the webinar. So with that, let me introduce our two speakers for you today. So firstly, Paul McClure is the Chief Revenue Officer of Ultra Commerce. Paul owns product strategy and innovation for Ultra Commerce and also the solution architecture team. Paul is also not too bad when it comes to karaoke. Then we have James Triggs. James is the delivery lead with Intellify. He has approximately 20 years experience in product management and project management and strategy roles. James comes to you today all the way from Orange in New South Wales. So with that, I'll hand over to Paul to get started.
Thanks, Katie. I can assure everyone that there won't be any karaoke on today's session. But look, first, let's just quickly, by way of covering the agenda, obviously going to introduce Ultra Commerce and Intellify, how we work together, and a little bit about both organizations. And really we wanted to capture up front the why, why you should care, the benefits that you should expect out of this kind of process. Obviously a key part of the theme of today is around automating traditionally manual processes within your businesses to optimize supply chain and interactions with customers. It's not, it is a journey, and we're going to talk about some of those steps along that journey. And then the middle section, which we hope is really relevant to you all, we've taken some real world use cases from organizations that we've helped with solutions, in multiple different ways. And we've tried to drill down on, some high level use case examples, but then three specific areas where leveraging AI and machine learning technology can really help in your businesses. We'll wrap that up with a bit of a summary, and then, as Katie mentioned, an open question and answer panel or session at the end. So firstly, just to briefly introduce Ultra Commerce and Intellify. So both very specialist organizations, Ultra Commerce delivering the digital commerce disciplines and a digital commerce platform. We're an Australian-owned organization headquartered out of Sydney here, and have multiple locations around the globe where we service a global customer base, delivering digital commerce platform solutions to a number of different businesses, B2C and B2B, and a lot of consumer packaged goods organizations as well. Our friends at Intellify are, a data scientists focusing on AI and machine learning, and the combination of our two technologies and our two approaches is really that data-driven commerce approach, where we're taking those insights and learnings and derivatives from AI and machine learning, and we're integrating that specifically with the commerce platform to deliver better outcomes for our customers. So in terms of the benefits to expect, or as I alluded to, really the why, if there's four kind of key categories that are important and mean different things to different businesses, but around delivering that desired customer or supplier experiences. There's a recent Gartner survey, and 57% of organizations stated that delivering the desired customer experience is the key challenge that they face in their digital commerce endeavors. Productivity, especially in B2B and manufacturing and that supply chain side, is a really critical element around cost and resourcing and managing that process. Traditionally in B2B, especially where it comes to commerce and the digitization or the digital transformation of business, there's a lot of disparate processes. There's a lot of very human-led or manual-based processes that organizations are encountering. And item 2 and item 3 kind of go hand in hand. by improving that productivity through a lot more digital channels, offline to online, by driving efficiencies through the organization, you can also significantly reduce cost. And last but not least, around increased revenues, it's about removing human error. It's about driving productivity. It's being able to service more customer demand, which is a challenge for a lot of B2B organizations. And it's also about opening up new revenue streams and new routes to market to deliver a better overall experience for your customer, but also increase conversion rates and driving more revenue. So that journey to automation, it's a very simple philosophy to say, well, we can just automate, all of these things and get this outcome. Unfortunately, in reality, it's not as simple as that. In many organizations, there's still a lot of offline channels, customer engagement or sales channels that organizations are needing to deal with. Customers and suppliers are having much more of a desire to interact with organizations in an online way. But the reality is, and this is some data from Accenture, the reality is, I think the standout point here is that 98% of buyers are forced to pursue offline help from a sales representative at some point throughout the purchase journey. And that's, really inhibits, in a lot of cases, your ability to automate from the front end, the customer, to the back end in terms of warehouse, supply chain, delivery, etc. Integrations are another key challenge. So this is a Gartner data point that applies across all digital commerce implementations, but they specifically cite B2B here. Integrations to other systems. Lots of organizations have multiple systems, not necessarily connected together, and it can be very challenging to, if you have multiple silos of data or multiple masters of information, to be able to correlate all of that technology and information and systems and processes together to get a unified view, of the end-to-end customer and supply chain synergies and relationship. The digital commerce platform and where it's evolving is in essence to be that integration engine that joins all of this capability together. You can think of it like the front door to your customer base. It's the ability to service the customer service representative requirements, but it's the facilitation and coordination with the other business systems, the warehouses, and also shipping, logistics, to be able to complete that story end to end in a unified way. Data is obviously an extremely important component when you're coming to automate tasks, and it's all about making better business decisions. There's a quote from The Economist back from their May 6th, 2017 edition that, in my mind is almost an understatement. The world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. And organizations are becoming much more data driven in how they make business decisions, make more informed decisions around pricing, remove some of the assumptions and do it blessed with data to support those decisions. It's how you can start to use some of the AI and machine learning capabilities to, based on insights that you weren't able to derive easily in the past, it's mine that data and pull out and correlate the relevant pieces of information. So then you can start to put rules and business rules around that and implement that either based on thresholds or coordinated ways to orchestrate and automate outcomes. And that gets us to our last step around automation. Speaking more specifically about the AI and machine learning components here, firstly, I just wanted to start with, again, another quote from Gartner. By 2023, 80% of organizations using AI for digital commerce will achieve at least a 25% improvement in customer satisfaction, which is obviously really important around retention and returning customers, and also driving conversion rates, through multiple different channels, driving revenue and importantly cost reductions. And for many businesses, that 25% improvement is very significant in terms of bottom line and also top line considerations. If we take that combination that we mentioned before of the two organizations and look at this from a data-driven commerce perspective, where the commerce engine is relevant to this is a lot of the data is under the control or accessible by the digital commerce platform itself. That's everything from streaming data that might be coming from devices or web applications, from the application itself, and the database technologies that underpin that, but also, and importantly, historical data. So that's everything from customer account information to browsing history, purchasing history, is all tied in and can be used in those historical data sets to be able to go and derive insights and intelligence that we can start to make better business decisions and automate outcomes. Digital commerce platforms, as we mentioned earlier, are also a key integration point to taking the siloed and distributed systems and tying them all together. And it's through those integrations that we get access to other data and potentially manual uploads into that same pool to really start to combine all of these assets together and look at things more holistically through a customer view, a supplier view, product inventory and logistics views. So if we talk about some of the AI and machine learning use case examples and some of those scenarios, this is definitely not an exhaustive list. We've pulled out the ones that kind of rise to the top when you think of the specific context of today's presentation. But the insights are really, great examples about how we can understand more about the customer, more about those buying behaviors, right down to sentiment and trends. Certain products or certain, categories of products sell differently. They may be seasonal. There may be compelling events that drive those, and there's leading indicators through those trends that can ensure that you've got the detailed information to know, do we have enough inventory? Do we have enough? Have we forecasted this demand appropriately? That we can make better decisions in the background that overall improves the customer experience. You've also got opportunities to go and automate tasks, things like fraud detection is one example. And that's all about building buyer and brand trust, being sure that you're safe to do business with and transact, in a commercial way. Customer segmentation leans into some of the personalization and other use cases where you can start to categorize your customer either based on those habits, based on their industry, based on their demographics, or any kind of coupling that makes sense for your specific business model, and then start to drive automated or responsive outcomes based on that decisioning. So some of the key, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to walk through three specific customer or multi-customer examples where we're taking those learnings and applying them in the context of this presentation. And the first one that we will touch on is order processing. So this is a big challenge for a lot of organizations. I mentioned earlier the desire to move to more online channels from offline, but the reality for a lot of organizations is that they have large long-term customers and almost that long tail, as it's often referred to, who are set in their ways, have specific ways that they interact with you, and disrupting and changing those systems to simply say, here's a shiny new web portal, go and order from here, is not realistic for a lot of organizations. Many of the organizations we talk to with this specific problem have what they describe as unsophisticated buyers who are very used to that, sort of more manual purchase order driven way. And the next example is about how we can bridge the gap between offline and online with technology. So the underpinning of that technology is a machine learning optimized capability that's an extension of what you may have traditionally known as OCR, that optical character recognition. And it has the ability to take scans of those purchase orders, whether they be faxed or emailed, but essentially static files, read out the key elements, and then we can programmatically take that output and push it into the commerce system. We've then got automation workflows that take that, and based on certain thresholds or certain criteria being met, can actually automate the fulfillment of that based on that workflow all the way through end to end, or flag that for a customer service rep to come and actually manipulate that in a more efficient manner. The specific customer example here, the owner of the problem was actually the customer service representatives themselves. This is an example of a B2B manufacturing organization. And again, only 15% of their current orders are delivered through online channels. 85% are delivered essentially offline via email or phone. They're because they deal with thousands of orders a month across those multiple channels, with the biggest pain point being around email, the key goal was to essentially take those emails, read them in, and automate the order processing and fulfillment. Unfortunately, the reality for that organization is the order processing is very manual today. They currently have 7 to 10, depending on the time of year, customer service reps, and they have limited, because of the lack of integrations with systems, limited visibility on stock and inventory levels, which often requires them to have to ring the warehouse and ask if they can fulfill orders based on those quantities available. There's also little to no ability for customers themselves to actually track orders without putting another call into the customer service rep. So the consequences of this are it's a poor customer or supplier experience, lost revenues due to order processing delays, especially during high or peak demand periods, and revenue leakage or lost revenues due to human errors related to order processing. The systems and the interfaces that they're dealing with are quite archaic and not flexible and not easy to use. And then last but not least is increased cost due to higher staffing and resource requirements to service the demand that they need to service, especially with human resources. So this is kind of a visualization of what we've just described, where the key element here and a key part of that challenge, lots of volume coming in via the offline channels, all burdened on the customer service representatives, and because of the lack of integration between systems, essentially needing to call the warehouse and manage that fulfillment in a very manual way. The solution to that problem was to take that machine learning technology. In this case, it was actually using the Amazon TextTrack technology, taking those PDF email orders, which were the biggest part of the problem, and using automated APIs to push them into the commerce platform, but equally importantly, giving the customer service representatives a much cleaner, nicer, easier to use interface where they can manage everything from the customer account to order management, fulfillment, and shipping the works through the Ultra Commerce platform. Last but not least, the customer service reps also have an assisted shopping capability, which means that they can impersonate a customer and essentially log in as their account and help walk them through that process. And that's everything to now an ability to go and negotiate those quotes online for the organizations and get some consistency and surety around how the organization handles pricing as well. So the outcomes delivered from that, as we mentioned, the ability for the customer now to essentially track that order status through the portal end to end, regardless of whether they ordered via email, on the phone, or on the web. Reduced operational headcount for the CSR teams, which significantly saves the organization a lot of money. So, about a 60% reduction in headcount is what's anticipated as that rolls forward. And then increased revenues through the ability to service more demand and a reduction in human errors from the previous manual processing. With that, I'm going to hand across to James to talk about some other significant use cases where AI and machine learning can offer benefits to customers. Thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So first up, we're going to talk about demand forecasting and how AI and machine learning have really transformed the way demand forecasting can perform. And look, the reason I love talking about forecasting so much is that it really is applicable across so many different scenarios in your business. So on the next slide, if you're across, if you're in the finance team and you're responsible for, forecasting cash flows and things like that, machine learning can help with that. Or whether you're in the operational side and you're trying to forecast call center staffing levels, it can help with that. We've done projects recently with Alinta doing forecasting commercial energy usage from their commercial customers. So it really is such a fundamental thing that can apply across so many different areas of your business. But today we're going to be talking about product demand and how the demand planning can do a better job using machine learning forecasts. And to give you a feel for it, one of our recent customers, we saw a 640% increase in their forecast accuracy from moving to a machine learning based model. So if we think of this use case, imagine you're a demand planner at a trade distributor. You're responsible for forecasting demand across 200,000 different SKUs. And look, in your ideal world, you really would love an easy mechanism to be able to get really accurate forecasts across all those products. But in reality, what happens is you're stuck with a system that is often based on more traditional statistical techniques. Some of the systems are still based on simple averages as opposed to trying to forecast demand across varying demand across time periods. And while you've got good intuition on what drives demand, ultimately you just simply don't have the time to apply that to every single SKU that you're responsible for forecasting. And ultimately what that means is that you end up with these forecasts that, some can be good, but others can be quite poor. And where you are making errors in the forecasting, that then completely flows through the rest of your supply chain planning processes. And when it does, for your demand planners, they then no longer trust the forecasts that are being generated. And if you're thinking about I guess what it costs you when you get mistakes and errors in your forecasting. So on this chart, we're thinking about the forecast for an individual product. So if you look at the areas where the actual demand is higher than what you forecast, ultimately what that means is that you won't buy enough inventory. So you'll end up running out of stock in your warehouse, and you'll end up losing sales because you just simply can't supply the customers. But on the other hand, if you're over forecasting how much you need, you end up with wasted resources. So you've got all that working capital tied up in that inventory that would be better used elsewhere. And this is typically what happens is you'll have some products where you're under forecasting and others that you're over forecasting. And ultimately, that's where I guess you kind of are making the investments in your inventory in the wrong areas as a result of that poor forecasting. One of the other benefits of machine learning based forecasting is that we can get much more granular than we used to be able to. So you can not just forecasting by SKU, but you can also start forecasting, by location or by branch or by warehouse, and get down to much more granularity in your forecasting. So if we start thinking about machine learning, and what I want to do here was sort of help you understand how machine learning is able to make such a difference in producing accurate forecasts. So to give you an example, so for Amazon.com, they went from traditional forecasting methods in 2007 to modern deep learning methods in 2017. And over that time, they saw a 15 times improvement in their forecast accuracy. So even with all the sort of the best people and technology they had back in 2007, they were still able to improve it 15 times. And the way that's been achieved is really with this shift from being sort of a univariate forecast, which means where you're just looking at just the volume in isolation and you're looking at it product by product, to moving into multivariate, where we actually start pulling in data from lots of different sources that help give us indicators around what's driving the demand. And this is where that tie-in with Ultra Commerce works so well. Having a platform that's actually collecting the data that can feed these algorithms is what really helps being able to deploy this sort of technology. So the types of data we're pulling in is we'll be pulling in categorical data across color, size, categories, etc. We might be pulling in related time series, so looking at how prices have changed over time, because obviously that impacts your demand. Even in some situations we find weather is a good indicator that's driving demand. And ultimately seasonality, when the business is open and shut and things like that. And so, one part of it is that shift in pulling in a lot more data points to drive these forecasts. But the other is the changes in the algorithm. So, commonly, as I said, a lot of platforms are still based on a simple average model. Others are based on models like ARIMA, which was developed in the 1970s. Whereas today we're getting the technology from some of the global giants like your Facebooks and your Amazon.coms, and they're making that technology available to other companies through open source and things like that. So thinking about the outcomes that really gets delivered from this, ultimately it comes down to forecast accuracy. That's really what we're trying to achieve. But in doing that, we're also able to, as I said before, get down much more granular into forecasting, by SKU, by location, by warehouse. And one interesting thing we've seen as well is actually, it's often a change management process in showing these results to your inventory teams and getting their buy-in. And really, scenario modeling is another area where machine learning can help show, the different outcomes that could be expected. So, for example, if pricing changes, then what would that scenario do to my expected forecast levels? So yeah, these are, I guess, some of the key benefits of demand forecasts. And I guess once we've now got a good demand forecast, really it segues into how we can use that to better plan our purchases. And I really like this quote from Gartner, talking about ultimately it comes down to the uncertainty in your plan, and really what machine learning achieves, it's able to convert that unknown uncertainty into a known variability. And you'll see how, as I go through the next slides, how that actually makes a difference when we're talking about purchase recommendations. So let's imagine in this scenario, you're a purchasing planner at a distributor. So you're responsible for 5,000 different SKUs that you've got to buy on a daily or weekly basis. Now, in your ideal world, you'd be able to optimize those inventory purchases for every SKU, and make sure you've got the right stock in the right locations at the right time, that classic thing that everyone talks about. But the reality of your world is you've got finance telling you need to reduce your amount of working capital. You've got sales or your branch managers telling you need to improve service levels. And so you kind of, again, you've got investments in the wrong areas, and that's what's, I guess, constraining you from being able to improve your service levels. And at the same time, you'll get, thrown these late notifications of things that go on promotion, and it becomes too late for you to use lower cost transport mechanisms. So, ultimately for you kind of get stuck in this situation where you can't make the right investments that you really want to be able to make. So talking about purchasing recommendations, really machine learning can kind of help bring all those parties together and get them happy at the same time across finance, sales, and the inventory team. And fundamentally, as I was talking before about that variability in demand, so, if you think about your safety stock, it's there to try and, protect from running out of stock due to variability in demand or variability in lead time. And when we start using machine learning to do much more accurate forecasts of this variability, we no longer need to hold the same level of safety stock in to deliver that. And so machine learning takes that demand forecast, the accurate demand forecast we generated earlier, and these new calculations around safety stock, and we're able to generate specific recommendations for the purchasing planner. So buy 300 widgets on the 1st of July. And again, this comes back to that tie-in with Ultra Commerce, where we're able to generate these recommendations, and through the purchasing model, we can get those integrated into Ultra Commerce. So you're making it much easier for the purchasing planner to go about their job. As a result of doing this, you kind of start to reduce the amount of over and under stocks, and for the purchasing planner, it can also be a sanity check. Sometimes they want to be able to cross-check what another system's telling them versus what they should be doing. And as I spoke about simulation earlier, this is another type of simulation that can be done with machine learning, where we're actually proving the value by simulating if the team were to follow these recommended purchases, what that impact will actually drive to your working capital levels. So ultimately, we're talking about the demand forecast, which flows through to your inventory forecast, which flows through your purchasing decisions. Now, if you think about that 15 times improvement in demand forecast accuracy that Amazon saw, and how that then flows through the process. So what you typically can do is start to reduce the amount of safety stock you're holding, which that obviously starts to pull down your average level of inventory, which frees up your working capital, right? And you can start making those investments in the areas you need to make. And to give you some example numbers on what some people have found. So inventory turns in one example was up 26%, at the same time as service levels were also up 16%. So obviously it depends on what base you're coming from at the moment, but you can start to see how that accuracy and the certainty you get from that forecast, improved machine learning based forecast, really flows through your system, and flows straight through into, as I said, the purchasing module in Ultra Commerce, and making it more efficient for your purchasing planners. So ultimately, those outcomes again are about reducing the amount of working capital that you've got tied up in inventory, reducing the amount of times that you actually run out of stock to serve your customers, and also reducing excess shipping. So no longer are you having to do those last minute emergency purchases to try and fulfill the stock that's run out of stock. Because you've got better certainty and better planning around your demand, and you're following the recommendations, you no longer have to bear those kind of costs. So so that's the bulk of what I want to cover. So I'll just hand back to Paul to wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you, James. I guess one of the key things for a lot of organizations, having a delivery promise for your customers within a certain set time frame is another key way to drive more conversion. So on average, 7% increase in revenue and performance and conversions by being able to deliver based on that delivery promise. And also statistically, if you are able to make that visible to the customer earlier in their buying journey, you can actually translate that to about 15%. So there's lots of opportunities to increase revenues, increase conversions, and deliver a better customer experience, knowing that they can rely on your organization to deliver within that promise. So in summary of this presentation, digital commerce is key to a digital business strategy across all organizations, regardless of types, but especially emerging in that B2B and supply chain relationships. Another quote here from Gartner: by 2023, artificial intelligence will be used by at least 90% of digital commerce organizations, and that's a really significant leading indicator as to where the technology is heading and the combination of the two. We feel like our two organizations, with Intellify being the data scientists and the specialists in AI and machine learning, and Ultra Commerce being the ultimate specialist in digital commerce, the combination of the two is a really powerful proposition. And the fact that we're productizing a lot of this capability together means that we can remove a lot of the heavy lifting for organizations versus big, long, traditionally people-based project services. So to summarize the topics we've talked today before we get into the Q&A, back to kind of this first screen around delivering the desired customer and supply experiences, improve productivity through digitization, delivery of efficiencies through automation, and increased revenues. Really what this nets out to, and the key value, is it's making your organization easy to do business with. And that's one of the key initiatives for a number of the B2B organizations that we're talking to in how they're managing their customer supplier relationships. We've also put together, and we will jump into Q&A. I think there's some questions from on the chat panel, but we've also put together a combined offering around a discovery workshop, which will be free upfront consultation with Ultra Commerce and Intellify, to come and understand your current business challenges and pain points, give advice on how we could help you to digitize your business, leveraging digital commerce and AI and machine learning technologies, and essentially build a joint roadmap that we can execute on, for your business to help you achieve your business goals. With that, I'll hand back to Katie for the Q&A section of the presentation.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, James. A very interesting and informative session. So I will remind participants again, please put your questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your Teams pane there, and we will do our best to get to them all. So a couple have come through as we've been talking. So I'll leave this open for either both James or Paul or to answer. So the first question that's come up is, how long do these types of projects typically take?
So James, I might get you to go first on that one, and then I'll kind of summarize after, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I guess one of the big changes is how it is much easier to do these machine learning projects these days, because some of the platforms have made the technology more readily available. So we can often see, starting from a proof of concept can be delivered, in terms of more proof of value, showing what results you could get sort of in the space of a week, through to, if we're starting to then integrate into bigger and broader business systems, we're still talking in the order of months, not in the order of years like these projects would have used to take.
Yeah, thanks, James. Look, one of the big reasons that organisations often have impediments to achieving some of these outcomes is because of a lack of in-house skills, and I think the combination of Ultra Commerce and Intellify, a big part of the design goal of our technology is to automate and orchestrate as much of these processes as possible. We can have basically a digital commerce platform stood up for you in less than an hour. That obviously doesn't have integrations into your specific business systems, but it's taking something that traditionally took weeks and months and making it very consumable and getting access to this capability as quickly as possible. The combination of Ultra Commerce and Intellify working together is to take the common elements that we see across the many different customer examples that we've given you here today and package and productize as much of that as possible, so that 80%, again, this is the design goal, but 80% of that capability is delivered with a handful of clicks or API calls, and then it's that last mile customization and tailoring to your specific business is where the expertise is required. So taking a lot of that burden off the customers to integrate and achieve this outcome themselves.
And that's a good point, Paul. And one of the questions that has come through is specifically around that. So they're saying right now we don't have the right internal skills to own or deliver this type of project. So what are your thoughts around the types of skills we would need internally?
Yeah. So the benefit of again a partnership with an organisation like Intellify, there's a lot of organisations that unfortunately aren't blessed with data scientists and data engineers who are capable of delivering these outcomes. Similarly, on the commerce side, commerce has really pivoted from being traditionally owned by IT to much more being owned by digital teams or business teams responsible for revenue and customer outcomes. And so as a result, the combination again of Ultra Commerce and Intellify is that we bring a lot of these capabilities to bear. We deliver this as a service, and we've also got pricing that's based on outcomes delivered versus the traditional large upfront capabilities. So to specifically answer that question, Katie, the key requirement from the customer is really getting access and getting buy-in from the line of business owners and the specific individuals like customer service reps and others. Or managers of customer service representatives who are responsible for those outcomes within the business.
James, any thoughts on types of skills people would need internally?
Yeah, look, I completely agree with the answer so far. So, some companies do have some teams that have some skills and experience in data science or in productionizing solutions and that sort of thing. But sometimes they either don't have the capacity or the experience in how you pull all this together and get it deployed and actually being used by the business. So we typically find we're often working to deliver that end-to-end solution, and as Paul was just saying, kind of it becomes almost a bit more of a product from the outside that you're engaging and taking a more of a sort of a product-based offering, and you're consulting with then the inventory teams and the people in the business that know what they want to achieve, but you're just helping deliver that outcome. So look, we typically don't find people haven't got, can't do these things because of a lack of experience. It's just about, partnering with the right people to help get these things delivered.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One of the last questions that came through that really ties into what both you and Paul talked through is, who do you typically see being the owner of these types of projects? And I guess we could talk about that from a business owner as well as maybe a technology owner.
Did you?
Yeah, so it's often. Sorry, go on, Paul.
You go.
I was going to say it's often a combination. So sometimes it will be, IT are interested they're aware of the latest technology and they're trying to drive forward the technology agenda within their business. So, often they'll be the ones raising the need for a newer and fresher e-commerce platform and taking advantage of machine learning. But often in terms of the business outcomes that get delivered from these it's someone else in the business that owns these. It's you know, it might be the head of marketing or the head of the inventory team that are ultimately owning the results that are getting delivered. So we often find we're engaging quite closely with those teams and along with the kind of the support of the IT teams as well.
Yeah, agree. I think the organisations that we're seeing do this successfully, you know, almost form a virtual or cross-functional team with constituents across, you know, multiple touch points in the business, and are driving forward towards one common goal. That's and often what you do see is that's the role that sometimes IT does play, where they're interfacing with the different parts of the business, but driving to the requirements of the individual business owners, and effectively being that champion who drives to that common outcome for all departments, or all, as I said, constituents in that outcome.
Okay, so thank you again, James and Paul. I haven't seen any more questions pop up in the chat Q&A, so we'll leave it there for the morning. Thank you very much for attending. Again, the recording of this will be sent out post-webinar, and if you have any questions, you can contact either Paul or James, and they would be more than happy to assist you. So thank you very much, and have a good day.